you've been hibernating for the last week, you've probably heard all the fuss about Miley Cyrus's performance at MTV's VMAs. I don't want to talk specifically about the performance or what might have been right or wrong with it. There are plenty of people who have done a really great analysis of the racism and sexism inherent in both the performance and people's reaction to the performance. And below the video, I will put some links to those articles so that you can get some analysis if you'd like it. What I would like to talk about instead is how to go about talking about this with our kids. But first, let's talk about why we would want to talk to our kids about this. First, if your child is over 10 and possibly even younger, and they go to a school with other kids, they are going to hear about this. And you want to be part of that conversation. And second, one of the misconceptions about feminist parenting or progressive parenting is that we are shielding our kids from the realities of the world, that we try to hide sexism and racism from them. And that is not true at all. I want to raise my kids to be social critics. I want them to be really good consumers of media because they're able to watch media and critically analyze it and not just believe what they see on the surface. And you can't do that if you're constantly shielding them from every type of media that you don't like. Now, I realize that everyone has their own comfort level, and you'll have to find where you lie on that spectrum. So in this case, I would want my kids, especially if they're teenagers, to view the Miley Cyrus video and be able to discuss it critically. Both the video and some of the ways that it was reacted to. So that's why you would want to talk about it. Now, the how you talk about it is something that I don't think a lot of parents are good at. And I know that it doesn't come naturally for me. As parents, we see ourselves as the authority figure, and thus when we try to have a discussion with our kids, we end up lecturing even if we don't mean to. There are times when you need to be giving advice or being the parent, but you also want to have a relationship with your kids where they feel like they can talk to you and that you will hear them and listen to them on equal footing. Say, for example, that your kids like Miley Cyrus and they really liked the performance. And if you say, so what did you think about the performance? And they say, I loved it. I thought she looked so sexy or something like that. And you're immediately like, well, I thought it was disgusting. You've just shut down conversation completely. You have lost the opportunity to have a true dialogue with your child about that. And I think we'll see when I show some of the techniques, the things that you'll be missing if you had come at it from a different way. So I'd like to go through 4 techniques that I like to use for having an open dialogue with your kids. So first is ask. And this is something we're probably good at for starting a conversation. So we might ask, if we know that they've seen it, what did you think about Miley Cyrus's performance? Or what were the kids at school saying about Miley Cyrus's performance? I think we normally do this as parents, and then we listen for about 5 seconds for what the child thinks, and we immediately jump in with, well, I think this, and I thought it was disgusting, or, I thought that the way they treated her was awful, and I thought they should have been yelling at Robin Thicke as much as they were at Miley Cyrus, and we start talking about eyes, and we've totally shut down the conversation. So if your child says, I really liked it, instead of saying, well, I can't believe you liked that because that was disgusting, ask another question instead. They say, well, what did you like about it? And they'll say, I thought she looked really sexy. And there you've opened up this door to talk about what it means to be sexy, why a young woman in the entertainment industry needs to be sexy. I mean, you just really just opened up a door. If she says, I thought it was disgusting, I thought Miley was a big slut, then you can say, well, what is, why do you think that? What does the word slut mean to you? And then you've opened up this whole doorway to talk about slut shaming and women being allowed, especially if they've grown up under the watchful eye of America on Disney Channel, their ability to break out of that and become a woman with full sexuality the way that they want to. So you can see how asking that next question can really draw the conversation into deeper waters and just keep it going. All right, the second tool is to reflect. And this is really helpful when you don't know what to say next, you can't think of another question, and definitely if you're really disgusted by what they just said and you disagree with it, you don't want to say that at this point because you want to keep the dialogue going. So reflecting what you've just heard is a really valuable skill. So if they say, for example, what if they said, and I can't fathom this, but what if your daughter said, well, I thought she looked fat? That's something that for me would be very triggering for me. My instinct would be to jump in and be like, what? She's not fat. Why would you think that? And what does it matter if she is fat? And that's just gonna shut the dialogue down. So instead, I can reflect what she said. I can say, you thought she looked fat, and just leave it at that. Put a question in it, and it's pretty obvious that you didn't think so in your tone of voice, but you're not being accusatory. You're not saying, you thought she was fat? You don't want to do that. The third skill for getting our kids to have open dialogue with us is to listen. And we can think of this in two different ways. First is to shut up. And I know that's a really hard skill for parents. We've been taught that the role of the parent is to fill in all the gaps. If the child has a question or a problem, we fix it. So we're very uncomfortable with silence or kind of letting our kids ruminate on something. So for example, if your child says, I think Miley looked like a slut, maybe you just don't say anything. Wait a beat. Let them mull it over in their head. That silence is an invitation to them to keep talking. You might find that they can work through the rationalization of it themselves. They can say, but, I don't really know her, and it's not nice to call somebody a slut. She can be sexual if she wants, and that's okay. And so you've seen, like, the cogs work in their head. They said something that was slut-shaming, and then you sat back and gave them the power to work through that. It becomes a very powerful realization to them than if you had just said, well, I don't think you should say that because that's slut-shaming. All right, the fourth way that we can encourage dialogue with our kids is to observe. And this is the technique I prefer if you want to inject your thoughts into the conversation, or you want to steer the conversation in a certain direction. Just saying, well, I think this could be something that derails the conversation, or makes your child shut down. So for example, if you've been talking about the Miley Cyrus performance and you want to bring up a new aspect of it that your child hasn't brought up or might not be thinking of, you could say, did you notice how all of the backup dancers were black females and how she kind of like slapped their butts and touched their bodies? What do you think about that? And that can steer the conversation in the direction of talking about the racial implications of the performance. As opposed to if you had just said, well, I thought the whole thing was racist, you're not giving your child a chance to say what they think about it or to mull that over. So reframing it as an observation is another powerful tool, which is really the whole point of ARLO, of going through the different techniques for developing a dialogue with your kids. It allows you to wonderful, meaningful conversations with your kids about things that are very important, like sexism and racism, things that will affect them as they grow up, things that will make them media savvy and critics of popular culture. It'll also deepen your relationship to a level where your child would be more likely to come to you if there's ever something really important to talk to. The cultural myth around teenagers is that teenagers and parents don't get along and teenagers never talk to their parents. And it is true that there is an important aspect of a teenager pulling away from their parent. That's the development of their own identity so that they can grow up and become adults. You don't want them to be dependent upon you forever. But I think it's a falsehood that we have to lose our relationship with our kids or lose the ability to discuss things with them. And I think if you keep this type of open dialogue, they'll know that they can come and talk to you about anything and that you're not going to launch into a lecture or some type of authoritarian consultation, that you'll be willing to hear their side and listen deeply and honestly and empathetically. So those are some ideas about how you could talk with your kids about the recent Miley Cyrus story. But also, it's great for anything, for any type of media that you want to talk about. Don't try to shelter your kids from the things out there that might be sexist or racist. Instead, discuss it, and you'll see your children flourish into people who make really good decisions and are very critical on their own of the type of media that they consume. And they'll just grow up to be wonderful adults. This has been Gentle Parenting Answers with Paige, and I'll see you next time.